A restaurant manager kicks out a high-profile White House official. What she does next? No one saw coming. Simone Walter thought she was just shutting the door on an old grudge. But when Karoline Leavitt gets booted from a local restaurant, that door slammed open into national chaos. One impulsive move, caught on camera, spiraled into leaked footage, public outrage, and a media storm that threatened to bury Simone's business for good. But here's the twist. Karoline didn't cancel her, but she did something far more unexpected, far more shocking. This is a story about two women, a shared past, and the one moment that changed everything. It was one of those days where everything seemed to happen in a flash. Karoline Leavitt, a young, successful secretary at the White House, had just wrapped up an exhausting meeting. The kind that drained you not just physically, but mentally too. Her stomach growled louder than her own thoughts, and she realized it had been hours since she had breakfast. Her usual go-to spot for lunch was temporarily closed for renovations, so she found herself searching for a new restaurant to just grab a quick bite and maybe get some work done in peace. That's when her colleague, an assistant from the press office, recommended a place just a few blocks down from her office, the Millstone Grill. It wasn't the sort of place she normally went to. She was used to more upscale, quiet spots, but at this point, she was desperate for food and somewhere to relax. How bad could it be? She pulled up to the small, unassuming building. The Millstone Grill wasn't exactly fancy. It just wasn't the kind of place that had its charm in being simple and no frills. As soon as Karoline stepped inside, she could feel the eyes on her. It was no surprise. Being the secretary to the President of the United States had its perks, but it also meant everyone knew who you were. The buzz of recognition swept through the room like an electric current. People just couldn't help but stare as she walked past the tables. One thing was clear. Karoline had a way of making an entrance even when she didn't mean to. As she made her way to a table, she caught the gaze of a middle-aged man who was practically shaking in awe. He was clearly starstruck, mouthing words she couldn't quite catch. Karoline, the ever-professional, offered a polite nod, but her mind was already focused on one thing she came for: food. She sat down in a booth near the window, not far from the entrance. A waitress quickly came over, smiling. "Welcome to the Millstone Grill. Can I start you off with a drink?" "Water's fine," Karoline replied, her thoughts already drifting to what she'd eat. Her usual choices weren't on the menu here, but something about the simple country-style food on offer felt comforting. She ran her eyes over the menu and decided on what to get. But just as she was about to settle in, something odd happened. A woman, whom Karoline hadn't noticed before, emerged from behind the kitchen doors. She was heavy-set, with tightly pulled-back hair and a scowl that could make a grizzly bear retreat into the woods. The woman's gaze locked onto Karoline, and for a moment, it felt like the room got quieter. A sense of tension hung in the air. The woman walked up to Karoline's table with purpose, stopping just short of where she sat. "Karoline?" the woman said in a tight, controlled voice, her arms crossed over her chest. Karoline looked up, slightly confused. "I'm sorry, do we—" "You're not welcome here," the woman interrupted, her voice sharp and firm. Karoline blinked. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice rising with genuine disbelief. "Are you— what?" "Look, I don't want you in my restaurant," the woman hissed, her face reddening. "You need to leave." Karoline froze. The woman stared her down. This wasn't a mistake. This was personal. But why? She glanced around the room. Whispers. Awkward stares. Then suddenly diners pulled out their phones, one by one recording what they thought to be a dramatic scene. Karoline blinked. Was this some kind of joke? A setup? The woman stood firm, arms crossed, expression stone cold. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she said again. Karoline's heart thudded in her chest. "You've got to be kidding me," Karoline mutters as she stands up. "Is this a prank? Is this what it is? Are there cameras here or something? The woman, who Karoline now realized was the restaurant manager, seemed unamused. Nobody has time to waste with you, she snapped, grabbing the menu from Karoline's hand with surprising force. You heard me. Get out. Karoline stood there, stunned. Her brain was trying to process what was happening, and she couldn't quite catch up. I just want some lunch, she said, her voice soft but with an edge. I'm hungry, I'm tired, and honestly, I don't know what the hell is going on. Can't we just call it a day and I'll be on my way? But Miss Simone, the manager, just wasn't having it. She shook her head vehemently. Number, I want you out. Now. Karoline's pulse quickened. This was getting ridiculous. She took a step back, pulling her coat over her shoulder and grabbing her bag. You serious right now? Her voice was calm, but the frustration slipped through. You really want to do this here? In front of everyone? Simone leaned back, arms crossed. Looks like you already did that yourself. Karoline's eyes narrowed. Wow, real mature. Simone shrugged. Just calling it like I see it. A sharp exhale, a clenched jaw. Unbelievable. Yeah? Try me? Simone stood there, arms crossed, staring Karoline down like she'd already won. But Karoline wasn't about to just walk away in silence. This is crazy, she muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing. With a swift movement, she turned and stormed out of the restaurant, the bell above the door jingling violently as she exited and got into her car and drove off. The nerve of that woman. To kick her out like that, for no reason. Karoline could barely wrap her mind around it. Inside the restaurant, things were no less tense. The people who had come to eat had their phones out, filming the whole thing. The buzz of whispers filled the air, but Miss Simone didn't seem to care. She just watched Karoline's car pull away from the parking lot with a grim satisfaction. Deb, the waitress who had been serving Karoline, stood near the back, unsure of what to do next. The tension in the air was palpable. Are you really going to just let her walk out like that? One of the customers asked, his voice full of disbelief. Simone just shrugged. She knew exactly what she was doing, she muttered. She's not welcome here. Deb, still shocked, couldn't help but feel uneasy. Something didn't sit right with her, but she wasn't in a position to say anything. But she saw something in Simone's eyes that night. And what Simone did next changed everything. Karoline slammed her car door shut with a loud thud. The engine barely had time to warm up before she sped out of the parking lot of the Millstone Grill. Her lips pursed so tightly it looked like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. She was embarrassed, starving, and pissed. The audacity, the actual nerve of that woman, that so-called restaurant manager, to humiliate her like that in public. She hadn't even made it to the appetizer section of the menu. As she weaved through downtown traffic, her mind replayed the moment like a broken record. The way Simone stood there, arms folded like a bouncer at some exclusive VIP lounge, glaring like Karoline had personally stolen her last piece of fried chicken. What the actual heck just happened? She muttered, gripping the steering wheel a little too tight. Back at her office, Karoline stormed through aggressively down the hallway with obvious frustration. She tossed her purse onto the chair, dropped into her seat, and stared at the wall for a second, like she was trying to piece together a crime scene. Then she picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts, thumb jabbing at the screen, until she found one name, Matthew McConaughey, her co-worker, the very guy who had recommended the Millstone Grill like it was a 5-star oasis of flavor and peace. The phone barely rang twice. Karoline! Hey, did you end up trying? Matt, she cut in, voice sharp. What kind of sick joke did you just pull? A beat. What? The Millstone Grill? That adorable little spot with life-changing soup? Her voice dripped with sarcasm. Yeah, I got kicked out. Kicked out? What? How? I don't know, Matt. I walked in, took a seat and immediately got treated like I was about to rob the place? Okay, that makes zero sense. What exactly happened? The manager practically teleported to the front and told me, "I think you should leave." Wait, what? Yeah. No, hello, no. Can I help you? Just straight up leave like I was a stray dog. What the actual hell? Exactly. So tell me, Matt, was this your idea of a joke? Or does this charming little spot just hate me specifically? Karoline, I swear, I have no idea what's going on. I was there last week. They literally gave me a free cookie. Oh, great. So they roll out the red carpet for you, but I walk in and it's DEFCON 1? Okay, this is weird. Are you sure? Don't even say. Are you sure you went to the right place? I mean, are you? MATT. That's insane, Matthew said. But for real, do you know her? The manager? Karoline's eyes narrowed as she thought about it. I don't know. Her face didn't ring a bell. But when she spoke, something felt off. Like I knew that voice, but I just couldn't place it. Oh my God, Matt. I meet a lot of people. It's hard to keep track, she said in a frustrated tone. Sure, but if someone hates you that much, you'd think it'd at least jog something, he replied. Karoline chuckled dryly. Welcome to public service. Half the country thinks I had a hand in ruining America. Could have been anyone. After a bit more back and forth, she hung up, still not satisfied. She stared at her screen for a long second, then locked the phone and tossed it onto the desk. The hunger was still gnawing at her stomach, but now it was mixed with something sharper. Not just frustration, but also curiosity. By the time 8:45 p.m. rolled around, Karoline was drained. She finished the last email in her drafts folder, slapped her laptop shut, and packed up for the day. As she walked out of the office, the fluorescent lights flickered above her, like they, too, had given up. The moment she stepped into her apartment later that evening, her husband, Nicholas, was already standing at the kitchen counter, swirling red wine in a glass like a man who'd been waiting for tea, and not the drinkable kind. You look like you've been through a lot today, he said. You won't believe the day I've had, Karoline replied, dropping her bag on the couch. She kicked off her heels like they were cursed. Remember that restaurant Matt told me about? I got kicked out, like full-on banned. Nicholas blinked. Wait, what? Yup, the manager said she didn't want me there, just told me to get out, said I wasn't welcome. Did you do anything to her? Karoline shot him a deadpan look. Babe, I walked in, sat down and asked for a menu. That's it. Didn't even get a chance to order water. Nicholas set his wine glass down. What's the name of the place? The Millstone Grill. Somewhere on the 9th. He tries to remember. Doesn't ring a bell. It could be one of those local restaurants looking to score cheap points by harassing political figures they don't like. Karoline, while unwrapping the food pack her husband had already gotten her, says, I don't know. The attack felt a bit personal, but at this point, I'm so over it. I have too many things on my hands to worry about. Nicholas raised an eyebrow. I still think I might need to have a word with this manager. She disrespected my wife. On what planet do I not follow up? She couldn't help but laugh. That was the kind of husband he was. Equal parts gentleman and enforcer. But there was something in the back of her mind that tugged at her memory. Simone, she muttered under her breath. Nicholas looked up. What was that? She shook her head slowly. Her name, the manager, Simone. Simone Walter. And just like that, the name hit her, clear as day, impossible to ignore. Her stomach dropped. This changed everything. Oh my God, no way, she whispered while gently dropping down her cutlery. No freaking way. Nicholas was watching her now, eyes curious. You remember her? I think I do. Karoline stood up and walked over to the kitchen, pulling out her laptop from her Burlington bag. But it can't be her. Simone Walter. That name, God, it's been years. She opened her browser and started typing like her fingers had a mind of their own. A few clicks later, she found the restaurant's website, then the About Us page. And there it was, a photo of Simone, smiling awkwardly in front of a wine rack, arms crossed like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Oh my God," Karoline breathed. Nicholas leaned over her shoulder. "Is that her?" "Yeah," she said, stunned. "That's Simone Walter. I haven't seen her since college." Now it was Nicholas who blinked. "College? You two were—" Karoline sat back, staring at the screen. "We weren't friends. I mean, not really. We were assigned to the same dorm sophomore year. We tolerated each other barely. She thought I was a stuck-up overachiever. I thought she was passive-aggressive and messy as hell." Nicholas smirked. "So just your average roommate experience." "She blamed me for everything. I remember this one time she failed a class and swore it was because I distracted her by being too ambitious. She was always trying to start fights and get the other girls on her side. It got really toxic by the end of the year." "And now she owns a restaurant and kicked you out of it," he said. "Small world." "No kidding." She leaned forward, clicking around the site, trying to learn more. There wasn't much, just a few photos, a simple menu, and some glowing reviews. But the more she read, the more convinced she became. It was her. The last time she'd seen Simone, they had been screaming at each other in the dorm hallway over something ridiculous. But now, all these years later, Simone was back, and apparently still holding a grudge. Karoline closed the laptop slowly. "That woman's got a memory like an elephant," she muttered. Nicholas stood by the kitchen island, arms crossed, brow raised. "So, what now?" Karoline didn't answer right away. She stared blankly at the steam rising from her untouched glass of wine, her jaw tense. Her mind wasn't in the kitchen, it was back in that restaurant, back to that moment, back to her. Simone. "I don't know," she finally muttered, then shook her head. "Number. That's not true. I do know." Nicholas tilted his head. "You're not thinking of going back there, are you?" Karoline let out a dry laugh, one that held more bitterness than humor. "No, I'm not walking in there to get tossed out a second time. But I'm also not going to pretend that didn't happen. I mean, that was Simone. After 7 years, we just run into each other like that?" Her voice softened a little, almost like she was talking to herself now. It didn't feel random, it felt unfinished, like something cracked years ago, and now it's trying to fix itself. Nicholas raised a skeptical brow, but Karoline was already somewhere else, deep in the past, chasing a ghost in heels. "This isn't just about embarrassment," she said. "Something broke between us." She exhaled, steadied herself. "Maybe this is the universe making sure we fix it. And fix it, we will." She pushed back her chair, stood tall. "She kicked me out." Her jaw tightened. "But I'm not letting this go. But if you think Karoline was just being stubborn, think again. To get it, you'd have to go back. The past doesn't stay buried, not when the wound still bleeds, not when the one who cut you is standing right there. And Karoline? She wasn't leaving this unfinished. The basket and a trip down memory lane. Karoline Leavitt wasn't the type to crumble under pressure. She worked in the White House, sat through war room briefings, handled press crises like a pro, and dodged shady reporters before breakfast. But nothing, and she meant nothing, prepared her for the absolute chaos of getting kicked out of a restaurant by someone still clinging to a grudge from college. Yeah, over a decade later, and the drama was still simmering. And now, sitting at her desk the next morning, with an overpriced iced latte sweating beside her keyboard, Karoline stared blankly at the screen. No press release, no urgent email, Not even a White House staff group chat meme could pull her attention away from the deep, echoing realization still bouncing around in her head. Simone. Walter, she whispered again, as if saying it a little softer would make it feel less ridiculous. No freaking way. But it was her, Simone, her old college roommate from St. Anselm College, the one who used to blast pop-punk music at 2 a.m., the one who kept tubs of frosting in the mini fridge and claimed they were for business research. The same Simone who'd once thrown a microwave burrito at her during a screaming match that ultimately led to Simone's expulsion. Yeah, that's Simone. Karoline blinked hard, then leaned back in her chair, letting out a long sigh. For a second, she almost laughed. The whole thing felt like a bad teen soap episode. It was wild how life circled back sometimes. Back then, Simone was a hothead with zero chill and even less interest in academics. Karoline remembered trying to help her study for finals once, and Simone just kept scrolling through Pinterest, looking at wedding cake designs, even though she wasn't dating anyone. Her head was always in the kitchen, never in class. And sure, Karoline had made one nasty comment about Simone wasting her tuition and never amounting to anything, but she was stressed, 20 years old, and running on energy drinks and instant ramen. Did she regret saying it? Of course. But Simone hitting her? That changed everything. One swing, one gasp, one RA scrambling to break it up. And just like that, expulsion. They went their separate ways. Karoline hadn't thought about her in years. Until now. Until yesterday. Until she walked into that restaurant for a damn meal and ended up on the wrong side of a petty flashback. Karoline rubbed her temple, then reached for her phone. She opened the Notes app and started typing. Dear Simone. No. Too formal. She wasn't writing a recommendation letter. Hey Simone. Ugh. Too casual. She backspaced and stared at the blinking cursor. What did you say to someone who'd literally thrown you out of their restaurant and who possibly hated your guts? Answer. You send a peace offering. She turned in her chair and looked at her assistant's desk across the room. Lydia? Lydia popped her head in like a meerkat. Yes, ma'am? Can you help me put together a gift basket? Lydia blinked. For who? Karoline gave a sheepish smile. A former roommate who now runs a restaurant and may or may not hate me. There was a long pause. Then Lydia grinned. Ooh, petty past drama. I'm listening. Karoline chuckled. Just find something nice. Local stuff. Honey, jam, baked goods. Something that says, I'm here to make peace. Got it. We're going full farmer's market diplomacy, Lydia replied with a wink before disappearing. A few hours later, Karoline stood over a carefully wrapped basket of goodies. Inside were 2 jars of organic raspberry preserves, a bottle of small-batch maple syrup, a box of artisan shortbread cookies, and, because Lydia did have a sense of humor, a candle labeled Olive Branch, smells like letting it go. Attached to the basket was a handwritten note. Simone, hey. It's been a long time. Too long, maybe. Yesterday was, well, unexpected. I guess we have some unresolved things between us. I won't pretend to understand how everything played out for you after college, but I know life isn't always easy. I wanted to say I'm sorry, for the past, for anything I said back then that hurt you, and for showing up in your space without knowing how it would affect you. That wasn't my intention. If you're open to it, maybe we could meet up. Coffee, lunch, your choice. Not to argue or rehash the past, just to talk. As 2 grown women who've lived a lot since dorm rooms and cafeteria drama, take care, Karoline. It was simple, direct, and most importantly, not written by someone holding a grudge. She nodded, sealed the envelope, and handed it off with the basket to a courier. And then, she waited. Karoline tried not to obsess over it, but of course she did. She refreshed her email a few too many times. checked her phone like it was going to burst into flames with a response. She even caught herself stalking the restaurant's Yelp page, wondering if anyone had posted about the crazy woman from DC who got kicked out. But the internet was oddly quiet. Too quiet. It made her uneasy. That night, at home, she sat across from her husband Nicholas, still picking at her dinner. "You sent a gift basket?" he asked, mid-bite of chicken parm. "Yep." "With a candle?" "Smells like letting it go." He smirked. "You're kinda cute when you're pretending not to be petty." "I'm not being petty. You're being dignified, which is just like premium petty." She shot him a look, stabbing at her pasta. "I'm trying to be the bigger person here. The high road is lonely and overpriced, okay?" Nicholas chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Still proud of you, though. You didn't have to do that." She sighed, finally cracking a smile. "Yeah, well, someone's gotta be the adult in this relationship." "That's crazy, 'cause I was just thinking the same thing about me." She flicked a piece of bread at him. "Eat your dinner, Nicholas." There was something about unresolved conflict that sat heavy in the stomach, heavier than the meatloaf she never got to eat. And even if Simone never responded, Karoline would sleep better knowing she extended the olive branch. But a small part of her, just a small part, wanted Simone to say yes. Not because she wanted an apology, not because she needed to prove anything, but because maybe, just maybe, there was still a version of this story that didn't end in shouting matches and slammed doors. Just two women with two paths and maybe one awkward coffee. Maybe. And then, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Karoline opened the message. "Lunch, neutral ground. I'll pick the place. Don't be late." No name, no emojis. Classic Simone. Karoline raised an eyebrow. "Well, here we go," she muttered. This wasn't over. Waking up to a sunny Saturday morning felt like the universe finally decided to cut Karoline some slack. No meetings, no press briefings, no cabinet members calling her phone like their lives depended on it. Just the quiet hum of the suburbs and the smell of fresh dew on the grass. Honestly, it felt like freedom. She laced up her sneakers and went for a jog around the neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just enough to get her heart pumping and remind herself she still had knees. By the time she returned, her cheeks were pink, her shirt was soaked, and her ponytail looked like it had survived a storm. But she was smiling. She had her iced coffee in one hand, her phone in the other, and best of all, her 8-month-old son was spending the weekend with Nicholas's parents. A full 48 hours of uninterrupted adult peace? That was priceless. As she kicked off her sneakers and shuffled to the bathroom for a hot shower, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Her eyebrows raised slightly. She had a good feeling she knew who that was. She wiped the screen clean with her shirt and unlocked the phone. It was a short message. "Let's talk. Café Verde, 1 p.m. Karoline stood still, half sweaty, half buzzed from caffeine, and smiled. Progress. That was progress. She typed back quickly, "I'll be there." Café Verde was tucked into the quieter side of town. One of those indie places that served everything in mismatched mugs and had local art on the walls. The kind of place where someone was always playing acoustic guitar in the corner, even if no one asked them to. Karoline walked in right on time. She wore a soft beige trench coat over a cream blouse, her makeup light, her hair in a loose bun. She wasn't here to make a statement. She just wanted peace. Simone was already seated at a small table near the back. Black sweater, hair pulled back. No smile. Karoline took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and walked over. "Hey," she said softly. For a second, it felt almost warm, like an olive branch wrapped in something fragile. But then, just a flicker, something unreadable crossed Simone's face. A shift, a crack in the moment. Was this peace? or just the opening move in a game neither of them ever really stopped playing. Simone looked up, nodded, and gestured to the seat across from her. "You came." Karoline sat down, exhaling. "Of course. I meant what I said in the note. I didn't want us to end things like that." Silence settled between them, thick but not quite heavy. Just the clink of coffee cups, the low hum of indie music. Simone finally spoke. "You know, I didn't expect you to actually reach out." Karoline frowned. "Why not?" Simone let out a short, humorless laugh, staring into her mug. Well, you. Washington, D.C., power heels, important meetings, press conferences. I figured I was just a footnote in your rise to the top." Karoline tensed, then exhaled slowly. "We weren't best friends, Simone, but that doesn't mean I forgot you." A pause, her voice quieter now. "And it doesn't mean I wanted things to go the way they did." Simone tapped her nails against her coffee cup, watching Karoline closely. Her lips pressed together like she was weighing something, deciding. Then, just as Karoline thought the moment might thaw, Simone leaned back and smirked. "Funny," she said. "I remember it a little differently." The air between them sharpened. Karoline met her gaze, steady. "Then maybe it's time we finally get the story straight." Simone's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. She exhaled sharply, then finally met Karoline's eyes. The steel in her gaze wavered, just a little. "I lost it. I'll admit that. When you walked in, all I saw was every reason I was supposed to hate you." Karoline arched a brow. "Yeah, got that loud and clear." She set her tea down with a soft clink. "Wasn't expecting hugs and free dessert, but getting kicked out? That's a whole another level." A flicker of something, guilt, maybe, crossed Simone's face. She let out a short breath, barely a laugh. "It was messy." Karoline leaned forward. "Messy? Simone, you practically threw me out like I was some ex who cheated and then set your car on fire." That pulled a reluctant smirk from Simone. "If the shoe fits." Karoline scoffed. "Oh, come on. You still think I was the villain in that story?" Simone's smile vanished. Her expression switched again, the ice creeping back in. "I think you walked away just fine. Meanwhile, I had to rebuild everything." The tension snapped back into place, thick and charged. Karoline held her gaze, unreadable. Then, after a beat, she sighed, shaking her head. "So what? You brought me here to rehash the past, or are we actually going to talk like grown-ups?" Simone's lips parted like she had a response locked and loaded, but she hesitated. Instead, she took a slow sip of coffee, eyes never leaving Karoline's. Finally, she set her cup down and tilted her head. "Guess that depends. Are you ready to hear the truth?" They spent the next few hours catching up, and surprisingly, it wasn't awkward. It wasn't even forced. Once they got past the history, they were just two women with lives that had spun wildly in different directions. Simone talked about her restaurant, how she built it from scratch, how she'd maxed out 3 credit cards to keep it afloat in the early days, how her mom's old recipes were what kept customers coming back. Karoline told her about the crazy schedules, the White House drama, the stress of being in the public eye 24/7, and the roller coaster of new motherhood. Somewhere between the second cup of coffee and a shared lemon tart, Simone sighed and leaned back. "I shouldn't have done what I did. I didn't think people would record it. I didn't think it'd blow up." Karoline nodded. "It's okay. I mean, it wasn't okay at the time. I was hangry and humiliated. But I get it now. You were holding on to stuff. I probably would have reacted the same way if the roles were reversed." They smiled at each other. Not best friends, but maybe no longer enemies. They talked for nearly 5 hours, and when they finally hugged goodbye in the cafe parking lot, it was that kind of awkward but genuine hug where both people still felt a little stiff, but it meant something. There was closure. Karoline got back into her car, turned on the radio, and hummed to the beat of an old pop song. For the first time all week, she felt like the knot in her chest had finally loosened. For a moment, it felt like the past was finally behind them. A truce, a clean slate. But peace is a fragile thing. And this one? It shattered faster than either of them saw coming. When Karoline walked into the house, still humming, she noticed Nicholas sitting on the couch, glued to his phone. His brow was furrowed, eyes locked onto the screen like it had just delivered bad news from Mars. "Babe, you will not believe the convo I just had," Karoline said, shaking off her coat. Nicholas didn't answer. She frowned. "Nicholas?" Still nothing, just him staring at his phone, jaw tight. Then, without a word, he turned the screen toward her. "You need to see this." She stepped closer. It was a video, grainy footage from the Millstone Grill. The exact moment Simone kicked her out. Her stunned face, the argument, the way she stormed out. And the title? Karoline Leavitt kicked out of restaurant. Real footage. Her stomach dropped. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Nicholas scrolled through the comments, his expression unreadable. "She got what she deserved. Cancel that restaurant now." This is why we don't trust politicians. The manager needs to apologize or shut the place down. Karoline let out a sharp laugh, but it wasn't funny. "Oh, wow. So we're trending now." Nicholas sighed, more like blowing up. She ran a hand through her hair. So much for moving on. It had already hit 1 million views. Karoline stared at the screen, her stomach sinking. "Oh my God!" Nicholas muted the phone. "This is going viral. It's all over Twitter, Reddit, everywhere." She covered her face with her hands. "We literally just made peace. We had lemon tart, for God's sake." Nicholas rubbed the back of his neck. "You need to put out a statement or something before this spirals." Karoline lowered her hands, exhaled deeply, and stared at the screen again. It wasn't about her reputation. It wasn't about being embarrassed anymore. This was bigger. People were mad. Cancel culture was revving its engines. And the worst part? Simone didn't even know what was coming. Karoline stood up slowly and grabbed her phone. She had to do something, fast. But before Karoline could make a move, the internet beat her to it. And suddenly Simone's world was spiraling faster than anyone expected. The fall of the Millstone Grill. When that video hit the internet, Simone really thought it'd blow over in a day or two. Maybe a week, tops. People get riled up. They post their little hot takes, and then they move on to the next scandal, right? Wrong. At first, it was just a few nasty comments under the Millstone Grill's Instagram page. Rude manager, bad vibes, hope the meatloaf's not as bitter and rotten as the woman running the place. Simone rolled her eyes and chalked it up to keyboard warriors with too much time and zero taste buds. She kept her chin up, even making an extra batch of her honey cornbread muffins. Because if the internet wanted drama, she was going to kill them with kindness and carbs. But then, the crowd stopped coming. Like, actually stopped. The regulars, the McKinleys who always sat at booth 4, sweet old Mr. Ellis who loved her chicken pot pie, gone. The lunch rush? Non-existent. Friday night date crowd? Crickets. It was like someone flipped a switch and turned her diner into a ghost town overnight. At first, she told herself it was just the weather. Then it was the economy. Then it was probably that new vegan cafe 2 blocks down with their overpriced oat milk and candles in mason jars. But deep down, she knew. It was the video. That 30-second clip of her yanking a menu from Karoline Leavitt's hand and hissing, "You're not welcome here," like a Disney villain. And the worst part? She couldn't even deny it. The video was real. Her face was real. Her words were real. And now the fallout was very, very real. She stood behind the counter of the Millstone Grill on a Thursday afternoon, staring at the empty tables. tapping her pen against the edge of her notepad. The clock ticked louder than usual, like it was taunting her. Rent was due in 5 days. Suppliers were starting to call, and there was a pink slip from the electric company tucked in her apron pocket. It wasn't a final notice yet, but it was close. Behind her, her kitchen staff tried to keep the mood light. Jesse, the line cook, was scrolling through TikTok with his headphones in, laughing at some cat video. Deb, the youngest waitress, was wiping down already clean tables just to stay busy. They were trying, bless them, but everyone felt the tension. Simone took a shaky breath and walked into the kitchen, trying to hide the worry on her face. She opened the fridge and stared at shelves full of food that nobody seemed to want anymore. Perfectly good food. Food she used to take pride in. Now it just looked sad. "Hey, boss," Deb called from behind the grill. "You good?" "Yeah," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." But she wasn't just thinking. She was panicking. The kind of panic that starts in your chest and spreads until your whole body feels like it's vibrating. She could barely sleep these days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that video. The angry look on her face. Karoline's stunned expression. The phones filming. The quiet gasps from diners who came for a burger and left with a viral moment. Simone sat alone in her office, phone in hand, watching Karoline's face flash across the screen. Sharp, composed, America's rising star. The headlines practically worshipped her. There she was, shaking hands with diplomats, smiling on camera, standing beside President Trump like she belonged there, like she wasn't the same woman who had walked into her restaurant, extended an olive branch, and then, what? Walked away, only to let the whole damn world rip Simone's life apart? Simone let out a slow breath, fingers tightening around her phone. Karoline hadn't reached out since that cafe meeting. And really, why would she? She had a country to help run. Meanwhile, Simone couldn't even keep her restaurant from crumbling under the weight of online outrage. It was almost funny. Almost. Had that little sit-down just been for show? A peace offering just convincing enough to make Simone let her guard down before Karoline let the world finish what she started in that dorm room years ago? Simone leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. If Karoline thought this was over, she was dead wrong. By the 3rd week, things got worse. Way worse. A supplier cut ties, said they didn't want the drama attached to their brand. A local magazine that once featured her in their top 10 small-town eats list quietly pulled her from the online edition. And that was the final straw for one of her waitresses, Tanya, who didn't even bother handing in a notice. Just ghosted. Simone stood in the back alley that night, trash bags at her feet, and lit a cigarette with shaky fingers. She hadn't smoked in years. But tonight, she needed something. Anything. How did it get this bad? She remembered a time when she used to dream about this place. The Millstone Grill was her heart. Her escape after everything went down in college. After her mom passed. After bouncing from kitchen to kitchen just trying to make rent. This place, these walls, had meant freedom, purpose, a second chance. But now it felt like a prison, a reminder of every wrong move she'd made. And the worst part? She wasn't even mad at Karoline anymore. That fire had burned itself out, leaving nothing but smoke and the kind of hollow ache she couldn't shake. What replaced it wasn't rage. It was something quieter, heavier. Regret? Maybe. Shame? Definitely. Because for all the ways she wanted to paint Karoline as the villain, Simone knew the truth. The restaurant wasn't struggling because of one viral video. The cracks had been there long before Karoline walked through those doors. That video just shoved her off the cliff she'd been teetering on for months. And now she had to sit in the wreckage and wonder if she'd done this to herself. The next morning, she came in early, hoping to clear her head before opening. She brewed the coffee, turned on the lights, and sat by the window with her notebook. Her to-do list was short now. Not because she'd finished everything, but because there wasn't much left to do. Jesse came in an hour later, looking a little too serious. He walked straight to her, took off his cap, and rubbed the back of his neck. "Hey, got a call this morning," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's a solid offer, better pay, closer to home." Simone frowned. "Okay, and?" He exhaled. "I'm taking it." Her stomach dropped. "Wait, you're leaving?" He nodded, eyes heavy. "Look, I didn't want to do this, but I've got a kid to take care of. Bills don't wait, Simone. You of all people should get that." She let out a short laugh, sharp, humorless. "Oh, I get it. Trust me." "Simone!" "No, it's fine," she cut in, jaw tight. "Do what you gotta do." He hesitated, like he wanted to say more, but in the end he just nodded. And just like that, she was down another person. He gave her a hug before leaving, and that's when it hit her, like really hit her. She wasn't just losing a business, she was losing her people, her dream, everything. By closing time, it was just her and Deb. "You should go," Simone told her gently. "It's dead tonight. No point in staying." Deb hesitated. "You sure?" "Yeah. Go." She grabbed her bag, paused, then gave Simone a long hug. "Things are gonna get better," she whispered before heading out. Simone stood in the middle of the empty dining room. Lights dimmed, chairs stacked on tables, and the soft hum of the fridge in the back. The silence was loud, too loud. She looked around at the place she built from scratch, now cracking at the seams. Just when she thought she'd hit rock bottom, the ground crumbled beneath her. Someone sent a message, and they made damn sure she got it. And in that moment, she realized. She wasn't just losing a business. She was losing everything. It was a Monday morning, and Simone was doing what she always did, pretending everything was fine. She got up, made herself a burnt piece of toast she barely touched, threw on her millstone grill apron like it was armor, and drove through quiet streets with her radio turned off. The silence helped her think, or at least try to. But nothing could have prepared her for what she saw when she pulled into the lot. Her heart dropped. The windows had been egged, sloppily, aggressively, yellow yolks dripping like tears down the glass. But that wasn't the worst part. In big, bold red spray paint across the front window were big X's with the words, "No one wants bully food, you can keep it." Her mouth went dry. She stepped out of her car slowly, almost in a daze, like her brain needed a minute to catch up with her eyes. Her stomach turned. She walked closer, hoping, praying, that maybe it was some sick prank. Maybe this wasn't her window. Maybe she was still asleep. But nope, this was real. Too real. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her keys. She pushed open the door and stared at her empty restaurant. The place that once smelled like fresh biscuits and Sunday morning. Now it just smelled like defeat. Simone dropped her bag on the counter, pressed her palms to the edge, and tried to breathe. But her throat was tight. Her chest even tighter. She sat down in the booth nearest the door, the one that used to be filled with laughing couples or old men playing checkers. Now it was just her, and the view of eggs sliding down her window like a slow, mocking reminder that the world was watching and judging. By the time Deb walked in, Simone was still in the same spot, eyes red, face blank. "Simone," Deb said gently, pausing mid-step. "Oh no." Simone looked up like she was waking from a long nap, her voice hoarse. "It's fine, I'll clean it." But Deb wasn't having that. "No, it's not fine." She walked over, slid into the booth across from her, and placed a gentle hand over Simone's. "Did you call the cops?" Deb asked. Simone gave a bitter chuckle. "What would I even say? Hey, somebody vandalized my dying restaurant. Can you come save my reputation while you're at it?" They sat there in silence, until the door creaked open again. Two of the kitchen staff walked in, Miguel and Janice. Simone looked up, trying to summon some kind of smile. But both of them had the same expression: apologetic, guilty, tired. Janice started, avoiding eye contact. We're going to step away for a while. Miguel stepped in. It's not personal. We just gotta do what's best for us. Simone swallowed hard and nodded. She didn't blame them, not even a little. But that didn't stop the sting. They each handed her a folded letter, whispered a few awkward words of thanks, and walked out. No hugs, no goodbyes. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind them. Simone stared at the letters on the table like they were eviction notices from the universe. That was 3 people in 1 week. 2 today. Who's going to be left tomorrow? I can't keep doing this, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Maybe it's time to let it go. Deb shook her head slowly. Nope, I'm not letting you give up like this. Simone let out a dry laugh. You really think I have a choice? The windows are vandalized, we have no customers, no staff, and the internet wants my head on a stick. What am I supposed to do? Host a bake sale? Deb raised an eyebrow. Number. But you're supposed to let people help you. Simone looked confused. Who's going to help me, Deb? My fairy godmother? No, Deb said, standing up. But maybe the woman who tried. Simone's stomach twisted. Karoline? Yeah, Karoline. The same Karoline you kicked out. The same Karoline who, despite that, still sent you a gift basket and sat down to talk like an adult. The same one the internet is tearing you apart over. Simone let out a dry, humorless laugh. Right. And you think she's just here to check in on me? See how I'm holding up after my restaurant got trashed? Deb crossed her arms. She's back, Simone. Landed last night. Simone's expression darkened. And you know this, how? Deb sighed. Because she reached out. Simone scoffed, shaking her head. Of course she did. Timing's a little too perfect, don't you think? Deb groaned. Come on, not everything is some grand conspiracy. I think she actually feels bad. Simone snorted. Oh yeah, I'm sure she's just heartbroken over my shattered windows. Deb's voice softened. She's not your enemy, Simone. Simone's jaw tightened. Funny. That's exactly what an enemy would want you to think. Simone bit her lip, not saying anything. Well, it's all over the news. I'm sure she's probably still jet-lagged and knee-deep in White House meetings. But I know her type, Deb continued. She doesn't like loose ends, and she definitely won't want this to keep spiraling. Simone sat back, wiping her eyes. You think she'll even talk to me after all this? Deb shrugged. Won't know until you try. But that night, as Deb sat alone, one thought wouldn't leave her mind. Simone was in deeper than she realized, and if she waited for her to ask for help, it'd be too late. So Deb made a choice, and what she did next set everything into motion. She pulled out her phone, sat at the counter with a half cup of lukewarm coffee, and sent Karoline an email. Nothing too formal. Just straight from the heart. Hi, Mrs. Karoline Leavitt. I'm Debbie Saber, a worker at Millstone. I know this might be asking a lot, but Simone's really hurting. The place got hit. Staff quit. She's breaking down. Please, if there's any way you could talk to her, maybe help clear the air publicly. It could really save this place. I know she wasn't kind to you, but I don't think she deserves to lose everything either. Karoline didn't respond right away, which was fair. Deb figured she probably had more important things on her plate, but the next morning, the 3 little dots popped up. Typing. Then the message came through. I'll be there tomorrow. As Simone's world collapsed, one person couldn't ignore the guilt. Karoline had a plan. Bold, risky, and completely unexpected. But was it a lifeline or the final blow? Keep watching to find out. The intervention Karoline had read Deb's text 3 times already that morning. And even though her inbox was blowing up with work emails and her phone wouldn't stop buzzing from some meeting change involving the vice president, her mind kept circling back to that one message. Simone's really not okay. But that night, as Deb sat alone, one thought wouldn't leave her mind. Simone was in deeper than she realized, and if she waited for her to ask for help, it'd be too late. So Deb made a choice, and what she did next set everything into motion. She pulled out her phone, sat at the counter with a half cup of lukewarm coffee, and sent Karoline an email. Nothing too formal, just straight from the heart. Hi, Mrs. Karoline Leavitt. I'm Debbie Saber, a worker at Millstone. I know this might be asking a lot, but Simone's really hurting. The place got hit. Staff quit. She's breaking down. Please, if there's any way you could talk to her, maybe help clear the air publicly. It could really save this place. I know she wasn't kind to you, but I don't think she deserves to lose everything either. Karoline didn't respond right away, which was fair. Deb figured she probably had more important things on her plate. But the next morning, the 3 little dots popped up, typing. Then the message came through. I'll be there tomorrow. As Simone's world collapsed, one person couldn't ignore the guilt. Karoline had a plan. Bold, risky, and completely unexpected. But was it a lifeline or the final blow? Keep watching to find out. The intervention Karoline had read Deb's text 3 times already that morning. And even though her inbox was blowing up with work emails and her phone wouldn't stop buzzing from some meeting change involving the vice president, her mind kept circling back to that one message. Simone's really not okay. Great. Now they've found my house. But then another knock. Softer. Familiar, even. She peeked through the blinds. Deb. Relief washed over her, but just as quickly, confusion took its place. Because standing right next to Deb was Karoline. Simone's jaw dropped. She didn't even have time to fix herself or hide the pile of takeout boxes by the door. She just opened the door with a stunned look on her face. Hey? She said, like she was still trying to figure out if this was a dream. Karoline gave a little smile. Hey. Simone blinked at her. You're in my driveway. Why are you in my driveway? Deb jumped in. Because you've been hiding in here like a hermit, and someone had to drag you back to the land of the living. Simone half laughed, half sighed. Y'all could have at least warned me. Karoline shrugged. You would have said no. Fair point. Simone stepped aside. Come in. Don't judge the mess. The living room was dimly lit, with a blanket cocoon on the couch and several empty coffee mugs on the table. The TV was paused on some reality show rerun, and a half-eaten donut was sitting on a napkin. Karoline looked around, trying not to let sympathy show too much on her face. You weren't kidding when you said things were bad. Simone sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. It's like I blinked and the whole world turned on me. Deb sat beside her while Karoline took the single chair across from them. The mood was quiet, raw, but honest. You know, Karoline said gently, when Deb reached out, I didn't expect to feel as guilty as I did. Simone raised an eyebrow. Guilty? For what? For not realizing sooner just how far this had gone, Karoline said. I never wanted this to snowball into something so toxic. Not for you, not for me. I figured after our coffee talk we were good. Simone let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. Okay, wait. Back up. You're telling me you're actually here to help? Karoline tilted her head. Why do you sound so shocked? Simone scoffed. I don't know. Maybe because a week ago I was convinced you were sitting in some fancy DC office, sipping overpriced lattes, watching my life burn from a distance. Karoline sighed. Simone, come on. If I wanted you ruined, I wouldn't have sent that gift basket. Simone blinked, caught between wariness and something unfamiliar, hope. You really mean that? she asked, voice quieter. Karoline nodded. Look, I get it. We have history, and not the warm, fuzzy kind. But Deb made me realize something. I can't sit back and let this keep spiraling. Not when I can actually do something about it. Simone studied her for a long moment, searching for any hint of hidden motives, but all she saw was sincerity. For the first time in weeks, she let out a breath that didn't feel like it was choking her. Simone leaned back, rubbing her tired eyes. We are. But the internet doesn't care about coffee talks. They care about viral videos and drama and cancel buttons. Karoline nodded. Yeah, been there. Silence. Then, you look like hell, Karoline said. Simone let out a short laugh, hollow and tired. Thanks. You sleeping? Does it look like it? Karoline exhaled, watching her. Simone could feel it, that careful gaze, studying her like a puzzle missing half the pieces. Simone chuckled, wiping a tear she didn't even realize had formed. It's been hard. I lost half my staff. Customers are gone. Rent's due in a few days, and I don't know how I'm going to pull it together. Karoline leaned forward. Well, what if I helped you? Simone looked up, surprised. Help me how? Karoline smirked. I do have a bit of a platform, a little influence, some friends in the press. You'd vouch for me, after everything? Karoline shrugged. People love a comeback story. Simone looked away, overwhelmed. I don't want pity. And I'm not offering any, Karoline replied. I'm offering a chance to make things right. For both of us. Deb sat there, smiling quietly, watching two women who had once been enemies, roommates, and who knows what in between, now trying to rebuild something from the ashes of a restaurant feud gone viral. Finally, Simone wiped her face, stood up, and walked into the kitchen. She returned with a fresh mug of coffee and handed it to Karoline. Karoline raised an eyebrow. Is this a peace offering? It's me saying, I'm willing to try again, Simone said softly, but I'm still not giving you the last donut. They laughed. Just for a moment it felt like everything wasn't on fire. And for Simone, that was enough hope to get through the next day. The comeback plan. When Karoline got home that evening, she couldn't shake the image of Simone from her mind, sitting in that dim, cluttered living room, her eyes puffy, hair disheveled, and soul clearly somewhere between regret and rock bottom. It wasn't the same firecracker Simone from college, or even the bold restaurant manager who'd kicked her out weeks ago. This Simone looked done. Karoline kicked off her heels, poured herself a glass of wine, and plopped onto the couch. The house was quiet. Nicholas was upstairs with their son, probably reading that bedtime story for the 5th time this week. She stared out the window, thinking. Everything in her heart told her one thing: I have to do something. She didn't owe Simone anything. In fact, if anything, Simone owed her an apology, a plate of food, and probably a lifetime supply of free lunch. But this wasn't about pride. Not anymore. This was about seeing someone fall and choosing not to look the other way. A few minutes later, Nicholas walked in, running his hand through his hair, looking all tired and handsome in that relaxed dad way he had. You good? He asked, flopping down next to her. She took a sip of wine and sighed. I went to see Simone. He raised an eyebrow. The restaurant lady? The same one, Karoline said. She's a mess, Nick, like full-blown falling apart. The internet dragged her to hell, her workers quit, and her place got trashed. She's just... I don't know. She's not okay. Nicholas leaned back, thoughtful. Yeah, well, go viral for the wrong reasons, and your life's over in 24 hours. He glanced at her. But why do you care so much? She sighed, swirling the wine in her glass. Because I was there when it happened, and I know what it's like. One bad headline, and boom, You're whatever the internet decides you are. Doesn't matter what the real story is." She shook her head. "I've got the fancy White House badge now, but that didn't stop people from digging up old college drama the second I got the job." Nicholas nodded slowly. "Yeah, that was a mess." Nick frowned. "Yeah, that was a mess." "Exactly." She sat up, setting her glass down. "I want to help her. Get her back on her feet. Rebrand. Start fresh. But she can't do it alone. No money. No reputation. What if we backed her? Helped her relaunch?" Nick blinked, then smirked. "Like, make her the underdog who comes back swinging?" Karoline grinned. "Bingo. The internet loves a good redemption arc." He rubbed his chin, thinking. "I mean, I do have a few empty properties. One of them's this corner lot downtown. Good foot traffic, decent space, just needs some work. Could turn it into something real nice." Her eyes widened. "Wait, that's perfect. You'd really help?" He shrugged, smiling. "If you're in, I'm in. And maybe I've been looking for an excuse to do something that's not just glass condos and overpriced parking garages." Karoline grinned, leaning over to kiss him. "You're kind of amazing, you know that?" Nick smirked. Yeah. Just don't make me regret it." 2 days later, Karoline and Simone sat face to face again. Simone still looked tired, but at least she'd run a brush through her hair and put on some lipstick. That had to count for something. Karoline placed a small envelope on the table between them and slid it across. "This is gonna sound insane, but I want you to hear me out before you say anything." "Okay. My husband has a property, a solid one, prime location, and I think we can renovate it into your next restaurant. New name, new space, new story." Simone stared at the envelope, her fingers tapping lightly against the table. She should have felt relieved, grateful even, but all she felt was wary. "I don't get it," she said, voice quieter now. "Why are you really doing this?" Karoline exhaled, leaning forward. "Because I know what it's like to have the world turn on you overnight, to be ripped apart by people who don't even know you, to have everything you built reduced to a headline and a comment section full of strangers deciding if you deserve a second chance." Simone's throat tightened. She looked away. Karoline's voice softened. "I know I should probably let this go and move on with my life. But the truth? I don't want to. Because no matter how we started, I don't want to be the reason someone else loses everything." A long beat. Simone swallowed hard, her arms still crossed, but the tension in her shoulders eased just a little. "This place," she finally said. "The one you're offering me, you really think it could work?" Karoline smiled. "I know it can." Simone picked up the envelope, turning it over in her hands. Her walls weren't down yet, but maybe, just maybe, she'd let a crack form. "I don't even know what to say," Simone muttered, voice cracking just slightly. "Say yes," Karoline replied with a soft laugh. "Say we get to work." A few weeks later, everything was changing. Nicholas pulled strings, and the paperwork was cleared. Simone toured it with Karoline, stepping into the empty kitchen, and for the first time in forever, hope hit her like a punch to the gut. Deb was back at her side, not just as an employee, but as a partner. She'd earned that. Karoline worked her magic, shifting the narrative. A few strategic posts, a candid interview, public opinion flipped. People love drama, but they love a comeback. And Simone? She came alive again. She showed up with ideas, with energy, with her sleeves rolled up and that fire in her eyes that had been missing for so long. As opening day crept closer, Simone stood in the middle of the space, the scent of fresh paint in the air, the low hum of a kitchen coming back to life. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "I might actually make it." But little did she know, some people weren't ready to let her rise again. And this time, they wouldn't just throw eggs. The new restaurant, blooms and bites, was stunning. Velvet booths, marble counters, soft, ambient lighting. It felt surreal, too perfect to be hers. If someone had blindfolded her and walked her in, she'd have guessed it belonged to some celebrity chef in Manhattan. Not Simone Walter, not the woman who once flipped sandwiches next to a leaky soda machine. And yet, here she was. The rebrand had been a dream, thanks to Karoline and Nicholas. His connections landed the property. Her influence reshaped Simone's image. A podcast feature, a behind-the-scenes vlog, a private tasting for DC's top food bloggers. The buzz was real, but with all eyes on her, one wrong move could shatter everything. People were talking. And that was the goal, right? Well, not exactly. Because while people were talking, not everyone was saying the things they'd hoped. A week into the soft opening, the articles started rolling in. Some were good. From viral villain to culinary comeback, DC's most unexpected restaurant revival. Those made her smile, made her hope. But then came the others. The leopard never changes its spots. From plates to PR. Does Simone Walter deserve our forgiveness? And the worst one, the one that made Simone want to rip the page out of the magazine and burn it. No matter how you rebrand, you're still known as the mean bully. Simone had cried when she read that one. Sitting on the back steps of the restaurant, apron wrinkled, hair a mess, she flipped through the magazine Deb had handed her. Her fingers trembled. And when she reached that line, something just snapped. "I'm not that person anymore," she muttered, voice cracking. "I was having a bad day. That's not who I am." But the internet doesn't forget, and it sure as hell doesn't forgive on the first try. Customers came, but quietly. No tags, no check-ins, no selfies, just hushed conversations and stolen glances. They ate, they left. Some whispered behind menus like she couldn't see them. She smiled more, offered free desserts to kids, hosted a community night, and donated half the proceeds to charity. None of it mattered. They still saw her. The woman in the viral clip, yanking a menu out of a public official's hands, spitting out the words, "Get out." She'd apologized. She'd explained. She'd turned her whole life upside down to prove she was different. Still, people chose to believe the worst. And Karoline? She saw it happening too. At first, Karoline thought the buzz would fade, that public opinion would eventually shift, like it always did. But as the days rolled on, and she kept tabs on the articles and comments online, it became clear. This wasn't just some temporary PR hiccup. This was a full-blown branding nightmare. One night, after dinner with Nicholas, she sat on the porch, scrolling through her phone. Her name was still trending in some circles, but now it was mostly attached to Simone's new restaurant, and the tone wasn't flattering. "She's backing a bully. Karoline's just trying to save face. Why reward someone who treats customers like trash?" And on and on. She tossed the phone on the table and groaned. Nicholas looked up from his glass of wine. "What's going on now?" Karoline sighed, leaning her head against the wooden railing. "They're still dragging Simone. Some people just don't want to let it go." Nicholas shrugged. "You did what you could. You helped her rebrand, gave her a shot. The rest is out of your hands." "No," she said, sitting up straighter. "That's the thing. I don't think it is out of my hands." He raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" Karoline didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared out at the dark sky, watching the faint flicker of lightning bugs dance across the lawn. Her mind was spinning, fast, not with anger or frustration, but with a fire, a purpose. Because if she'd learned anything in politics, it's that people don't always believe what you tell them. They believe what you show them. Words were cheap, actions that carved itself into memory. And Karoline had something big planned, something that could either rewrite Simone's story or burn everything down for good. If people weren't going to believe Simone had changed, then maybe Karoline needed to make them believe it. So she stood up from the porch swing, grabbed her phone, and walked back inside. Nicholas called after her. "Babe, what are you doing?" Karoline turned, a determined look flashing in her eyes. "Something big." "What kind of big?" She paused, then smirked. "Something that's going to shut everybody up. The redemption. We didn't see coming." The soft glow of the TV flickered across Karoline's face. She was in the Oval Office, surrounded by aides. The president had just finished his address. Everyone started shifting in their seats, ready to wrap it up. But Karoline knew it was now or never, and so she hurriedly took her chance and ran with it. "Thank you, Mr. President," she said, voice steady, but you could hear the edge. "Before we move on, I need to say something." The room froze. "You've probably heard the name Simone Walter," she continued. "She's been dragged through the mud for months over one bad moment. But we've all had those, haven't we? Anger makes you snap, say things, do things you regret. But remorse?" She leaned in slightly. "It's not just about apologizing, it's about showing up different." She scanned the room, making eye contact like she was daring someone to disagree. "Simone's not perfect, but she's been putting in the work. She's taken every hit, and she's still standing, still building, still cooking her heart out." There was a loud pause, so much you could hear a pin drop. And yet, the media won't let it go. The public won't let it go. They keep punishing a woman who's already learned her lesson. At this point, there was a ripple of discomfort through the room, but Karoline didn't flinch one bit. She held her head high, stared into the eyes of everyone, and continued. "You all say you believe in second chances," she said. "Well, here's one. Go eat at her restaurant. Try the food. See who she is now. Judge her by today, not by yesterday." And then a loud applause followed as she exited the podium. Within minutes, headlines flipped like a switch. "We love when women support women." "Girl power in the press room." "Karoline Leavitt just changed the game." Meanwhile, across town, Simone hadn't even meant to turn the TV on. She was still in that foggy, half-defeated headspace where even pouring a cup of coffee felt like a win. But something made her grab the remote. Habit. Hope. Who knows? She clicked the TV, blinked. There was Karoline, on live national television, and she was talking about her. Simone leaned forward, coffee forgotten. Her breath caught in her chest. Karoline didn't come on the podium to talk politics. She was going off script, saying Simone's name with pride, with compassion, with truth. No spin, no damage control. It was crazy. I mean, no one expected that she'd pull that kind of move. By the time Karoline was done, Simone's hands were wet. She hadn't even noticed the tears. They weren't loud sobs, just that quiet, aching release you get when someone finally sees you. Suddenly her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and that's when all hell broke loose. She thought her phone was glitching, or maybe it was more bad news, a takedown, another headline. But when she picked up her phone and opened Instagram, her jaw dropped. Mentions, shares, tags, DM requests, story mentions, all over the place. This is the redemption arc we love to see. Girl went from villain to visionary. "At the Bloomin' Bite, I need a reservation ASAP. I'm trying that lobster mac and cheese." Karoline is that girl for sticking up for Simone. We love to see women supporting women. People weren't mad anymore. They were cheering. And for the first time in months, Simone didn't feel like hiding. She felt seen. And damn it, she felt ready. She blinked at the screen. Her follower count had gone from a humble 135 to over 50,000, and that was within 6 hours. "I think I'm going to throw up," Simone muttered, half laughing, half hyperventilating. It was like the whole internet had all decided to flip the script. Out of nowhere, people weren't just forgiving Simone. They were cheering for her. And it wasn't random nobodies. No, this was big. Celebrities, food bloggers, influencers, hell, even a judge from that fancy cooking show were all reposting her story, tagging her, telling everyone to give her restaurant another shot. Simone's first instinct? Call Karoline. She wanted to scream, "Thank you," into the phone. Maybe cry a little, send flowers, or a cake, or a 20-pound gift basket filled with gratitude. But she knew Karoline was in D.C., tied up with political meetings, probably too busy saving the country to pick up. So she did the next best thing. She texted Deb, "I need to hug someone, and I pick you. Also, you're now kitchen manager." Surprise. Deb's reply came almost immediately. "OMG, wait, what? I'm on my way." By that evening, Deb was there in uniform, grinning ear to ear and nearly knocking over a tray of cutlery in her excitement. "I go from slinging plates to running the kitchen?" she teased. "Simone, did the fame go to your head already?" Simone laughed. Her cheeks actually hurt from all the smiling she hadn't done in months. "Nope, I'm just giving credit where it's due. You believed in this place. That makes you family." Deb blinked hard, trying not to cry. "Then let's make this place better than ever." And better it was. The next 48 hours were a blur. Instagram blew past 296,000 followers in 48 hours. It felt like a dream. The restaurant phone? Ringing off the hook. People were calling from out of state just to get on the wait list. And TikTok exploded with reviews, video uploads, and viral trends that just kept increasing day by day. People were crying into their cameras, eating Simone's food. One girl actually sobbed while biting into a chicken pot pie, saying it tasted like a second chance. Then there was the guy who filmed his proposal. Right there, at Bloom and Bite, with candles flickering and everything. By the end of the weekend, every table was packed. The once quiet kitchen was buzzing with energy, the sound of clinking dishes and sizzling pans blending with laughter and conversation from the dining room. Simone, wearing a crisp black blazer and a renewed sense of pride, made her rounds, checking in on guests, shaking hands, and yes, even taking selfies. Simone's restaurant saw a surge in patrons, all eager to witness the transformation Karoline had vouched for. The air was filled with the aroma of exquisite dishes, and the ambiance buzzed with lively conversations. Simone moved through the dining area, greeting guests with a warmth that matched the meal's flavors. This was more than just a comeback, it was a full-blown resurrection. Still in the middle of the chaos, Simone found a quiet corner to send one simple message. "I don't know what I did to deserve your kindness, but I promise I'll never forget it. The world finally gave me a second chance, because you held the door open. Thank you, Karoline, truly." And while she knew Karoline probably wouldn't see it right away, just sending it made her feel like the story had finally come full circle. She wasn't the same Simone who'd thrown Karoline out of her restaurant. She wasn't the angry college dropout who thought the world was against her. She was a woman who messed up, stood up, and thanks to one powerful speech and the support of the right people, rose again. The applause faded, but the question remained. Was this her moment of triumph, or just a temporary high before the fall? Had Simone finally broken free from the past? Or was it still lurking, waiting to drag her back under? From broken to blooming months have gone by. Seasons changed, trends shifted, but one thing that stayed consistent was that Simone Walter was finally winning. No more dragging headlines, no more empty restaurant chairs, no more waking up with that sinking feeling in her chest, wondering how she was going to make rent. Those days feel like a distant, blurry nightmare now. Today, Simone wakes up in her new home, a modest but beautiful house just outside the city. Hardwood floors, her dream kitchen with marble countertops, and sunlight spilling into her living room like it was auditioning for a magazine cover. It was hers, all hers. And this wasn't just any win, it was the kind that felt earned. The kind that makes you pause every now and then and whisper to yourself, I really did that. Her new restaurant was booked out every weekend for the next 3 months. The fancy marble sign outside that reads, The Bloom and Bites, shines like a crown jewel in the district. People came not just to eat, they came for the vibe, the food, the story. That story of a woman who once got canceled and came back stronger, thanks to an unexpected ally. Karoline Leavitt. Simone couldn't talk about her success without bringing up Karoline, and she didn't try to. Whether she was giving a short interview to a local food blog or sitting on a velvet couch on morning television, she always said the same thing with a humble smile. I owe a part of my comeback to a woman who chose kindness over pride. Karoline showed me grace, and that gave me the strength to do the rest. And the world noticed. Her phone buzzed constantly, not with negativity like it once had, but with interview requests, partnership offers, influencer collabs, and even some brand deals. She turned down most of them. Simone was never in it for fame. She just wanted to feed people. Good food with a side of warmth. She had also promoted Deb. Sweet, loyal Deb, who never jumped ship even when the restaurant looked like it was sinking. Now, Deb wasn't just running the kitchen. She was managing events, testing out new seasonal menus, and helping Simone lead a small but mighty empire. And you bet she had a title to match. Creative Culinary Director. Fancy, right? Simone's confidence had bloomed. She walked taller, spoke clearer, smiled more. She even laughed at things she would have cried about before, like when her old college frenemy Tanya tried to slide into her DMs with a, "Hey girl, we should catch up." Simone just rolled her eyes and smiled. Too late, sweetie. And Karoline? She was still working at the White House and still jet-setting on official business, but she and Simone kept in touch. Quick texts here and there, a lunch when their schedules aligned, a shared meme about college dorm room disasters. They weren't best friends, but they had something deeper now: respect. During the week, Simone planned to host a private tasting event to launch her spring menu. She included top celebrities, food critics, on the list. Food critics. Of course, she didn't leave out influencers with their ring lights and captions already written. Saturday came in with that soft golden glow that made everything feel magical. The city was buzzing with spring energy, warm sun, cool breeze, people out in their pastels. And right in the middle of it all, Simone's restaurant, Bloom and Bites, was glowing up for the biggest night of her career so far. Her private tasting event for the brand new spring menu. Inside the restaurant, everything was set like a dream. Fresh flowers on every table, soft jazz playing in the background, custom menus printed on thick ivory cardstock. Simone had gone all out. This wasn't just a menu launch. It was a celebration of how far she'd come. And Deb, bless her heart, was flying around like her life depended on it. Checking the wine stock, guiding servers, adjusting candle heights. The whole thing felt like a Pinterest board come to life. Simone was, however, for some reason, nervous. She kept checking the entrance, glancing at her phone every 5 minutes. Karoline had promised she'd try to come, but Simone also knew Karoline was halfway across the country, attending a high-level event with the president and other officials. There was no guarantee. Still, she'd reserved a front-row seat just in case. A simple name card that said Karoline Leavitt sat in its place like a hopeful whisper. Guests started arriving. Local food bloggers, city council folks, loyal regulars, even a couple of news anchors who had been following Simone's journey from the beginning. They were sipping champagne, taking photos of the decor, hyping up the menu launch. Simone was mid-sentence explaining her new citrus-glazed duck entree to a local journalist when it happened. The room shifted. All at once, heads turned, conversations paused, and a hush fell across the restaurant. In the doorway stood Karoline, glowing like something out of a Vogue cover shoot. She wore this long, champagne-colored sequin gown that shimmered with every step, her blonde hair pulled back in a soft bun, heels clicking gently on the hardwood floor. Simone's jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me?" she whispered under her breath before practically sprinting from behind the host stand. They met in the middle of the restaurant like a slow-motion movie scene. Simone didn't even wait. She wrapped her arms around Karoline in a hug that said a million things at once. Gratitude, relief, joy, friendship, all packed into one tight squeeze. "I didn't think you'd make it," Simone whispered. Karoline smiled, pulling back just slightly. "Are you kidding? I told you I'd be here. I hopped on a red-eye right after the meeting, slept in the car, touched up in the airport bathroom. No way I was missing this." Simone blinked fast, trying not to cry. "I kept a seat for you, front row, just in case." Karoline grinned. "Glad you did." As the evening rolled in, Simone raised a glass to her guests. "I want to make a quick toast," she said, her voice warm and steady. "To new beginnings, to second chances, and to the woman who reminded me that we don't always need to fight fire with fire. Sometimes a little grace does more." The room erupted in applause. Karoline smiled, sipping her wine, her eyes a little glassy. Not from the wine, though, from the moment. The rest of the evening was pure magic. The event flowed seamlessly. Laughter, clinking glasses, murmurs of approval. Guests raved, reporters took notes, influencers flooded their feeds. This wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a movement, a second chance unfolding in real time. And as the last guests left, their words still echoing. "You did it. This place is special." Simone stood frozen in the middle of it all. She'd fought for this, bled for this, but she hadn't done it alone. Karoline, Nicholas, Deb, they had lifted her when she was too broken to stand. But as the lights dimmed and silence settled in, one question lingered in the air. Had they helped her rebuild a dream, or just delay the inevitable? 2 weeks later, Simone got a letter in the mail, an envelope with a golden seal and no return address. Inside it, a single page with the official Michelin logo printed at the top. At first, she thought it was spam or some kind of hoax, until she read the line that said, "Bloom and Bites has officially been awarded Michelin stars for excellence in culinary innovation, presentation, and service." She gasped so loudly that Debbie thought something had caught fire in the kitchen. "No freaking way!" Simone yelled. She grabbed her phone and immediately started pacing, rereading the letter over and over again. Then it hit her. That man. She remembered him now. Quiet, dressed in a simple navy sweater, sat alone in the corner booth that night. He ordered 3 dishes, barely spoke a word, smiled politely, paid in cash, and slipped out before the event ended. She hadn't thought much of it. Turns out, that man was the reviewer, and he gave her restaurant 3 stars. Simone burst into laughter, not the polite kind, the real body-shaking, "I can't believe this is my life" kind of laughter. "This is insane," Deb squealed, jumping up and down in her tiny kitchen. "You're officially Michelin-rated, girl." Simone could barely hear her over the pounding of her own heart. She stood there in the middle of Bloom and Bites, holding that golden sealed letter like it was made of diamonds. The sunlight poured in through the tall windows, catching on the edges of the framed reviews and soft spring flowers lining the counters. And just as she was about to sit down and breathe, finally breathe, suddenly, the front door swings open and Simone looks up. There she was, Karoline, exuding effortless confidence in a sleek blazer and dark sunglasses, a perfect blend of power and peace. "Hope I'm not interrupting," Karoline said with a smirk, taking off her shades. "I was craving something fancy for lunch. Figured I knew a place." Simone couldn't stop grinning. "You came on the perfect day." "Oh, I know." Karoline winked as she glanced around, her eyes locked on the shiny new plaque hanging proudly near the bar. 3 bold words gleaming under the lights. Michelin 3-star rated. "Wow," she said, stepping closer. "You really did it, Simone." Simone just smiled, a little breathless. "We really did." Karoline turned back to her, eyebrows raised. "No, you did this. You turned your whole story around. You earned this. I'm just here for the duck confit and maybe a side of your famous lavender lemonade." Simone laughed. "Girl, lunch is on the house today." "Perfect," Karoline said, sliding into her favorite booth, "because I brought my appetite and a little bit of time to soak in your greatness." Simone rolled her eyes, chuckling as she grabbed a menu anyway. "Don't go making me cry again. I'm already running on 3 hours of sleep and sheer adrenaline." Karoline looked around at the buzzing restaurant, the glowing staff, and the proud walls. Then she looked at Simone, eyes soft. "You're killing it, and I couldn't be prouder." And just like that, Simone felt it all over again. That same magic. The kind that only shows up when people choose grace over grudges, and friendship over fame. By morning, Simone's name was everywhere. From scandal to Michelin star, Simone Walters' shocking comeback. Local news ran it. National food blogs followed. The same people who once tore her down were now singing her praises. She was reigning in the culinary world. One night, after a long shift, Simone sat on her porch, wine in hand, and just breathed. She looked around, her own house, her dream restaurant, messages pouring in. And she whispered, "All this because someone chose kindness." She never imagined this life, that she'd go from a college scandal and a spatula to a respected name in the culinary world, but she didn't quit, and someone believed she was more than her worst moment. Karoline didn't have to show up, but she did. She didn't have to defend her, invest in her, or care, but she did, and it changed everything. Sometimes, the messiest moments lead to the biggest transformations. What started as a viral disaster became the comeback no one saw coming. But here's the real question. Was it luck, timing, or just the right people showing up at the right time? One thing's for sure. Second chances don't knock twice. Drop a comment if you believe in redemption, and don't miss what's coming next. It's even wilder. Click now. See you there. See you.